someone ever asked me, Amelia, when did you realize you were the extra in your own family? I wouldn't answer right away. How could a 6-year-old child possibly understand what it feels like to be replaced? But I remember the day everything changed. It was the day my younger brother Andrew was born. Before Andrew came along, my childhood in Seattle was filled with peaceful moments. Every night, my dad would read me Grimm's fairy tales, while my mom gently braided my hair, telling stories about big, soaring dreams. I used to be the little girl riding on my father's shoulders every weekend to Alki Beach, where we'd collect shiny seashells together. The drawings I made, even if they were nothing more than messy preschool scribbles, were proudly displayed on our fridge like priceless treasures. Then Andrew was born, and my world slowly faded into the background. I remember my 7th birthday vividly. For months, I had been wishing for a red bicycle. A small one, just enough for me to ride around the neighborhood, feeling the cool summer breeze through my hair. I plastered pictures of that bike everywhere. On my bedroom door, my desk, even slipped one into my mom's wallet. A child's version of begging. When my birthday came, I eagerly unwrapped every gift. But all I found were dresses and beginner reading books. When I quietly asked my mom about the bike, she smiled and said gently, "Bicycles are expensive, honey. You don't need one yet. Walking is good for you." I said nothing. But just 3 weeks later, my parents surprised Andrew with a brand new blue tricycle. No special occasion, just because, in my mother's words, Andrew needs more exercise to strengthen his legs. I stood by the window, watching my father crouch down, teaching Andrew how to ride. The feeling wasn't jealousy. It was something colder. Like I had never existed in their plans. That was just the beginning. Slowly, everything I once had was replaced. The day my teacher praised me for having the highest English scores in class, I rushed home with my certificate, hoping for a proud smile. But when I handed it to my mom, she barely glanced at it and casually said, "Good job, sweetheart. But did you know Andrew built a bunny out of blocks today? So clever." That evening, I sat curled up by the window, listening as my parents recounted Andrew's achievement over and over with a level of excitement they never reserved for me. I was only 9 then, but I had already begun to understand, bitterly, that in my parents' eyes, everything I worked for was just expected, while anything Andrew did, no matter how small, was treated like a miracle. I once tried to tell my mom how I felt, that sometimes I wanted to be praised too, to see her eyes light up for me. But she just patted my head, gently yet coldly. "Amelia, you're the older sister. You're supposed to set an example. Don't fuss over little things." And so, every emotion, joy, sadness, hurt, was locked away in an invisible box inside me. The favoritism only grew more obvious as time passed. Andrew was allowed to be messy, selfish, even rude, always excused with, "He's just a kid." But me? I was expected to be patient, to understand. Above all, to accept my role as the shadow behind the family's golden boy. Back then, I wasn't strong enough to fight back. But deep inside, a part of me had already started to go numb. And that was only the prelude to everything that would come next. At 14, I earned my first paycheck. A part-time job at a small bookstore on the corner of Fremont Avenue, just a 15-minute walk from home. The job wasn't glamorous, but to me, it felt like a ticket out of Andrew's suffocating shadow. Every afternoon after school, I carefully stacked books, dusted shelves, labeled new magazines. That small taste of independence made me feel worthy. I dreamed of saving enough to buy a camera I desperately wanted, or maybe just a good pair of headphones, without having to ask for permission. But that dream crumbled after just 3 weeks. One late evening, as I got home from work, my mom called me into the living room. Her voice was sweet in that familiar, dangerous way I had learned to recognize. Amelia, your father and I have talked. It's good that you're earning money, but as the older sister, you should learn to share with your brother. Andrew wants to take swimming lessons at the community center, but the fees are quite high. Starting this month, you'll give him half of your wages, all right? I stood there, speechless. Swimming lessons? I kept my voice steady. I can help watch Andrew after school. I can even teach him at the public pool for free. But that money is from my work, Mom. Mom tilted her head, her gaze sharpening. Amelia, don't be selfish. You should be proud to support your brother. If you keep holding on to this narrow mindset, you'll never learn what it means to sacrifice. I wanted to argue, but I knew it would only make things worse. In the end, I could only nod, my heart sinking. From that day on, every month, I handed over a thick envelope with half my pay, supposedly for Andrew's swimming lessons. In reality, I watched him waste it on video games, new headphones, and even expensive designer sneakers. Not once did my parents stop him. That was just the beginning of countless other times I was obligated to share. Andrew got used to borrowing my things without asking, my cherished iPod, even the first leather jacket I bought with my own hard-earned money. One time, I caught him bragging about that jacket at school, grinning as if it were some kind of trophy. When I confronted him, my father simply sighed. He's still young, Amelia. He doesn't think things through like you do. As his sister, you should be more understanding. Understanding. That word slowly turned into a curse for me. The harder I worked to be independent, the more my family used it as a reason to pile responsibilities onto me. Every effort I made was repackaged as my duty to sacrifice for Andrew, the boy who, in their eyes, could do no wrong. I realized then, to them, I wasn't a daughter with dreams or ambitions. I was a background character, existing only to compensate for Andrew's shortcomings. A walking shadow, expected to earn, endure, and yield. I used to think, maybe things will change when I grow up. But deep down, I knew, in this house, my role had been decided long ago. And those wounds, though invisible, ached more with each passing day. By 17, I was numb to hearing my parents' praises for Andrew. At the time, I was a senior at Roosevelt High in Seattle, ranked in the top 3 of my class, working evenings 3 days a week at a bookstore and freelancing graphic design jobs on weekends, all to save up for my biggest dream. A semi-professional camera. Photography was the only thing that made me feel truly seen. After school, I'd wander alone around Union Lake, capturing the last rays of sunlight, the shadows stretching long over the water. In those frames, I wasn't Andrew's sister, wasn't the stand-in for anyone's expectations. I was just Amelia, whole and complete. Every dollar I earned went into a small tin box, hidden deep in my desk drawer. It was my secret, my dream, safely tucked away from Andrew's greedy hands. Or so I thought. One late evening in March, after a shift at work, I came home to find the tin box gone. The drawer was pried open, its contents scattered. I tore apart my room, palms cold despite Seattle's mild weather. Then, from the living room, I heard laughter, and a sentence that sent a chill down my spine. I told you, Andrew should learn to be self-reliant. He saved up and bought himself new streaming gear. Such dedication deserves praise. My head throbbed. New gear. The money I had scraped together over a year reinvested into my brother's frivolous hobby. I stormed downstairs, blocking the TV where Andrew sat, proudly showing off his new setup. Andrew, that was my money. You took my tin box, didn't you? He shrugged, not even bothering to look up. You can earn it back. It's not like you're doing anything meaningful with those stupid photos anyway. I turned to my parents, waiting for a shred of fairness. But my mother only sighed. Amelia, hiding money in your room was irresponsible. You should have given it to us for safekeeping. Andrew needs the equipment to pursue his interests. As a sister, you should support him, my father added, his tone flat. Money is just a tool. What matters is that family shares with each other. Share? No. This wasn't sharing. This was theft, disguised under the noble-sounding excuse of being a good sister. That night, I sat in my dark room, my heart heavy. But this time, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for a new job. I needed more than a bookstore paycheck, more than freelance scraps. I applied to be an assistant at a local wedding photography studio. The work was grueling, setting up props, cleaning, editing hundreds of photos late into the night, but at least it was a path out of this endless cycle of thankless sacrifice. In the following days, I left early, returned late, avoiding everyone in the house. The kitchen lights stayed on every evening. Andrew still laughed loudly over his new gadgets, and my parents pretended not to see me walking past in silence. But I no longer cared. Every time I closed the studio door behind me, I knew I was getting a little closer to my own world, where no one could take away what I had chosen. 1 week after turning 18, I left home. No party, no farewell. Just a quiet Saturday morning while everyone slept. I packed my bag, grabbed the keys to a small rented room in Capitol Hill, and closed the door behind me. No one stopped me. No one even asked where I was going. And that was the last time I ever lived there. In the years that followed, I poured all my time into work. By day, I was a photography assistant. At night, I took on freelance editing gigs. Weekends were for small events, anything to earn more. Those first dollars from my passion, though modest, made me feel like I truly existed, standing on my own 2 feet. Then, a local photography exhibition changed everything. Jake appeared in front of my display, quietly observing each photo of Seattle in the morning mist. No small talk, no pretentious art critiques. He simply stood there, nodded, and smiled. "You make this city look like it's breathing," he said. We exchanged numbers that day. No rush, no noise. But from that moment, Jake gradually stepped into my life, patiently, gently, and unexpectedly warm. Jake was a civil engineer, 4 years older than me. His family lived in Tacoma, the kind of family I thought only existed in movies. Dinners together, parents who spoke to each other with kind eyes, and questions about work or life that never carried judgment or comparison. The first time I visited Jake's home for Thanksgiving, his mother hugged me tightly at the door. She didn't ask about my grades or my salary. She simply said, "Did you have a tiring trip, sweetheart?" That one simple question nearly brought me to tears. 3 years later, on a snowy winter night, Jake knelt on a small patch of grass under a soft amber streetlight and handed me a simple silver ring. "Amelia, I don't want you to just stand behind the camera. I want you to walk through life with me, in every real frame." I nodded, no hesitation. But happiness, as always, never came easily to me. News of our wedding quickly reached my old family. Less than a week later, my mother called. This time, there was no fake sweetness. She got straight to the point. "If you plan on abandoning your family on such an important day, I'll have to reconsider the inheritance. Andrew will be named the primary heir." I scoffed. Inheritance? An old house still under mortgage? A car my father was still paying off? Or perhaps the pile of debts Andrew had racked up from his reckless spending. But they thought that was leverage. They thought I still longed for a place in the tiny world where they had kept me trapped for so many years. The next day, Andrew started texting. "You're so ungrateful. Mom and Dad raised you, and now you're planning to make them a laughingstock in front of everyone? A wedding without family? What a joke." Or wait, maybe that's your thing, playing the victim for pity points. I didn't reply, but the phone wouldn't stop buzzing with their venom. A few old friends reached out too, mostly well-meaning. "Family's still family. If you can forgive, you should. Your wedding's supposed to be a happy day. Don't let stubbornness become regret." I understood. They hadn't lived in that house. They had no idea what it felt like to be worn down piece by piece. Jake sat beside me through those nights, quietly holding my hand. "We'll only invite those who truly love you," he said, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. That was when I knew. This time, I wouldn't back down. 1 week before sending out the invitations, I received a message from my mother. "Family needs to talk, not over the phone, and definitely not through outsiders." I knew outsiders meant Jake. After many nights of Jake listening to me vent without interruption, he gently suggested, "If you feel you need to say it all once, I'll go with you, but only this once." So, that Saturday morning, we sat in a small cafe in Ballard, far enough from downtown to avoid familiar faces, quiet enough that no words could hide. My mother arrived first, impeccably dressed, makeup flawless but eyes heavy with exhaustion. My father followed, wearing his worn-out suit, still clinging to his old dignified demeanor. And finally, Andrew, slouched in a wrinkled hoodie, headphones hanging around his neck, barely pretending to care where he was. No one ordered anything. Mother spoke first, her tone a blend of reproach and pleading. "Amelia, I don't understand why you would cut off your own family on what should be the happiest day of your life." I kept my composure, my hands tightly clasped under the table. "Because I want that day to truly be a happy one, Mom." Dad's voice was sharp. "You're turning yourself into a stranger to your own family." Jake placed his hand gently on my back, a silent reminder. "Just tell the truth." So I did. I spoke about every time I was dismissed, every dollar I was forced to hand over to Andrew, every dream crushed under the label of big sister's duty. I reminded them of the camera, the reward I had worked so hard for, that was taken and turned into Andrew's gaming setup. The entire time I spoke, Mom kept her head down, twisting a napkin in her hands. Dad stared out the window, as if none of this concerned him. Only Andrew broke the silence, with a sentence that made the entire table go still. "Yeah, she's right. I took that camera. Not just because I wanted it, but because I hated how she always made me feel small." I wasn't surprised. Honestly, I had been waiting for that confession for years. Andrew sneered, but there was something else in his eyes. Not quite satisfaction. "You think being top of the class, handling everything yourself makes you so great? You have no idea what it feels like to always be compared, to always fall short. Everything comes easier for you." Mom hurried to interrupt, her tone suddenly soft. "Andrew's still young, you know. He's just confused." Confused? Andrew was 24, and I was far too familiar with how this family disguised every fault as mere confusion. I stood up, dragging a heavy silence with me. But then, unexpectedly, Dad spoke. "If it's just about money, your mother and I are willing to cover all the wedding expenses. Consider it an apology." Jake gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. I took a deep breath, meeting Dad's eyes. "My wedding isn't something to be bought in exchange for silence, Dad. I don't need anyone's money but my own." Andrew shot up, his chair slamming against the floor. "Fine. Keep hiding in your little bubble of independence. By the time you realize family's what really matters, it'll be too late." His words didn't hurt anymore. If anything, they made my resolve clearer than ever. We left the cafe, walking away from people who used to call themselves family, and from a simple truth. Some bonds, no matter how close by blood, can't be healed with apologies that come too late. Oh, and I thought that meeting would be the end of it. But I had underestimated my mother's need for control. 3 days later, she showed up unannounced at the studio where I worked. No call, no warning. Immaculately dressed as always, every crease in place. But her eyes were red, as if I were the one who had driven her to the edge of despair. "Amelia, come out here so we can talk." I kept my voice even. "I'm busy with work. You can leave a message." She didn't budge. She stood right in front of the entrance, clutching her leather bag. You can't keep running away like this. We're family. I stepped forward, maintaining just enough distance so she couldn't touch me. Family isn't an excuse to disrespect someone, Mom. The studio staff began to notice, pretending to stay focused, but their glances were obvious. My manager shot me a concerned look. I knew I had to put an end to this. You should leave. If you don't, I'll have to call security. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother actually step back. She turned away, visibly shaken. But I knew this wasn't over. That night, my phone exploded with calls from relatives. My aunt, my father's sister, even a distant cousin from New Jersey, each with their own advice. Don't do something you'll regret when you're older. She's still your mother. Families fight, but a wedding should have everyone there. And Andrew? He sent me a voice recording. You know, I made a bet with my friends, wondering if you'd actually dare have that wedding without Mom and Dad. Can't wait to see who'll show up to celebrate with you for real. I didn't respond, but Jake did. He sent me a simple message. Tomorrow we're changing every password for the wedding services, and we're hiring security for the big day. We began tightening every step of the preparations. The guest list was thoroughly reviewed, and every vendor was instructed to confirm any requests directly with me or Jake before making changes. I knew too well. My parents wouldn't accept being left out, and I was right. A week later, the banquet manager called me, sounding confused. Miss Amelia, someone claiming to be your father just requested to change the seating chart. He said there must be a head table for your family and asked to add 10 more guests. I thanked her for calling and reminded her we had a password. They wouldn't get through. But what sent a chill down my spine was my mother's message right after. If you want everyone to see you as an ungrateful daughter, I'll make sure you succeed. I didn't reply. I didn't cry either. Instead, Jake and I arranged for an additional layer of security at the wedding. We didn't discuss it much, but the way he looked at me, steady, calm, was enough to remind me I wasn't facing them alone anymore. Some close friends expressed concern. They're doing this because they care about you, Amelia. Don't be too harsh. I stayed silent. There are things outsiders will never understand, and they don't need to. With 5 days left until the wedding, every morning I woke up to new messages from Andrew, a mix of mockery, insults, and bossy demands. My parents had switched to emails, attaching old family photos as if those images could patch up the years of damage. But all I felt was relief. For the first time, I was living for myself. 3 days before the wedding, I got a call from Madison, an old high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Amelia, there's something... I'm not sure if I should bring this up, but lately I've seen some posts about you on Facebook. Are you okay? I frowned. What do you mean? Madison hesitated. They're saying, you're having a mental breakdown, overwhelmed with wedding stress, acting irrational. That your family's so worried but you've cut them off. I didn't need to ask who they were. I opened Facebook. I had unfollowed most of my family long ago, but when I checked my mother's account, the posts appeared immediately. As parents, the most painful thing isn't being rejected by your own child, but watching them spiral out of control and being powerless to help. Praying Amelia finds herself again before it's too late. Beneath were hundreds of sympathetic comments, shares, words of encouragement, all directed at them. No one asked why I had chosen silence. At that moment, Jake walked in, phone in hand. His expression was calm but firm. Andrew just called the church venue. Claimed to be my brother, trying to add 30 seats for your extended family. I froze. Fortunately, the staff there knew better. They checked with me first. Jake sat next to me, opened his laptop, and started reviewing every vendor account. We need to be ready for the worst. If they're bold enough to impersonate me, they won't hesitate to show up and cause a scene. That night, we held an emergency meeting with the security team. The wedding was initially planned with standard security, but after everything, I knew my parents wouldn't quietly stand aside. We upgraded the entire plan. QR code check-in for every guest, internal security covering each section, and a rapid response team on standby for any unexpected disruptions. I didn't want my wedding to become a battlefield, but I also wouldn't allow anyone to ruin it. The next morning, I received an anonymous email. Subject: Family is forever. The message was brief. Who do you think you are to deny the very people who gave you this life? It would be such a shame if your wedding became the talk of the town because of your blatant ungratefulness. Attached was a photo of Jake and me at a wedding dress fitting, clearly taken from a distance without our knowledge. Chilling. I immediately forwarded the email to Jake. He simply replied, "I'm handling it." That afternoon, Jake's lawyer got in touch. Papers were already prepared to request a restraining order should my family engage in any harassment on the wedding day. Any sign of trespassing, disruption, or defamation would trigger immediate legal action. Jake didn't say much, but every action he took made me feel safer than any words of comfort ever could. The night before the wedding, I sat on the balcony, watching Seattle bathe in cold yellow lights. The city remained loud, but I was all too familiar with the silence from my family. No congratulations, no messages asking how I was. Instead, the same old blame. She's bringing this on herself. Your poor parents, suffering because of her stubbornness. I read them but didn't react. Explanations wouldn't change anything. People believe what they want to believe. Wedding day. Seattle was neither blazing hot nor pouring rain. A rare, gentle kind of weather, as if it had chosen to side with me. The garden venue outside the city gleamed with fresh greenery, adorned with pure white ribbons. I stepped out of the car, gently holding my wedding dress, my heart surprisingly calm. Jake had arrived early to oversee everything. His friends and family were all there, their faces glowing with joy. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to handle every detail alone. As I smiled, the head of security approached with a serious expression. "Miss Amelia, they've arrived." I didn't need to ask who. My parents and Andrew. They stood at the main gate, dressed formally as if they had been invited. Dad wore his old suit from my uncle's wedding last year. Mom donned her usual special occasion teal silk dress. Andrew was different. Hoodie, backward cap, radiating his typical defiance. They spoke to security, my mother's sharp voice slicing through the air. I heard every word from a distance. "We are the bride's family. No one has the right to keep us out." The security manager looked at me, waiting for instructions. Jake stood beside me, unwavering. "It's your call, Amelia. Just remember, today is your day, not theirs." I nodded. "Stick to the plan. They're not on the list. No entry." The security team executed flawlessly. Dad tried intimidation. Mom switched to theatrics, raising her voice to draw attention, while Andrew stood back, arms crossed, throwing snide remarks loud enough for passers-by to hear. Look at her, earns a little money and suddenly forgets who she is. But this time, their judgments, insults, and stares no longer touched me. They were outside. I was standing in my own moment. I turned away from the gate, walking straight into the venue. The string quartet began to play. I walked down the aisle covered in white petals, each step lighter than the last. Not because of the dress, not because of the eyes watching, but because I had finally let go of the heaviest burden. The impossible expectations of those who should have loved me most. Jake stood waiting at the end, his smile as steady as my anchor. In that moment, I realized, for years I had been running after validation from a door that was never going to open. Today, I no longer needed it to. I had opened my own door and stepped through it. The ceremony was perfect. No disruptions, no surprises. Everyone who truly loved me was there, witnessing, celebrating. No one mentioned duties. No one lectured on what family should be. When the announcer said, "I'm honored to present, for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Jake and Amelia," the applause roared like a wave. Outside the security perimeter, my parents remained standing. Andrew had vanished at some point. They stared in, frozen, like strangers lost in a place that was once theirs. But I didn't walk over. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I knew. Some doors, once you close them yourself, mean you're finally ready to walk forward, no matter who's standing behind. I held Jake's hand tightly as we left the ceremony, the music still echoing behind us. That evening after the wedding, Jake and I sat together on the rooftop of a small hotel in Bainbridge Island. From there we could see the twinkling lights of Seattle in the distance. But this time, they no longer made me feel alone. Jake's family gathered downstairs, still laughing and chatting. They weren't flashy, not loud, but every glance, every gentle gesture made me understand what a real family felt like. No one asked about my parents. No one questioned why the bride's family wasn't there. And I was grateful for that. Just when I thought things were settling down, my phone buzzed. An email from Andrew. Subject: better late than never. I read it slowly, without rushing. Amelia, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I also understand why you did what you did today. These past weeks, I've been thinking a lot about what I've done to you. About that camera. About the things I said, just to feel less pathetic myself. I've signed up for therapy. Maybe you won't believe it, but for the first time, I want to do something on my own, without hiding behind mom and dad. I don't expect you to reply. I just want you to know. Standing outside that fence today, I finally understood what it feels like to be left out of your own life. I closed my phone and set it down. Jake looked at me, didn't ask anything, just quietly held my hand. This time, I didn't feel angry. But I didn't feel relieved either. What remained was clarity. Some apologies come late not because people don't know they're wrong, but because they never had the courage to admit it when it still mattered. I opened my phone and blocked Andrew, then Mom, and finally, Dad. No more emails, no more texts, no more midnight calls filled with scolding or begging. Strangely, pressing block felt lighter than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't an act of angry severance. It was liberation. I no longer resented them. But I would no longer allow them to have a say in my life. The next morning, Jake and I left the city. No fanfare, no dramatic goodbyes. We went to a small coastal town in Oregon where no one knew my story, where people simply smiled at each other on the streets, asking about life in small, gentle conversations. During morning walks along the beach, Jake held my hand tightly. We talked about little things. A newly opened cafe, a stray dog the whole town was helping, planting more lavender on the balcony of our upcoming apartment. No more heavy questions about fulfilling duties, no more reminders of years spent being a backdrop for blind favoritism. I was living the first days of a new chapter. Light and peaceful. When we returned to Seattle, I cleared out every photo, file, and link that kept me tied to my parents. Not to deny my roots, but to stop letting the past dictate my present. Jake watched as I finished packing everything away, smiling as he said, "Finally making space for the things you truly want to keep." He was right. That wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a boundary. I'll never let something happen to him anymore, once and for all. Our flight to Santorini took off on a bright summer morning. Jake held my hand as the plane lifted from the ground, his eyes gleaming with that familiar excitement. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling his steady, calm breathing. A feeling I had once thought would never be mine. We didn't choose Greece because of picture-perfect tourist ads. We chose it for a simple reason. I wanted to stand on a cliff, looking down at the Aegean Sea, where no one knew me as Amelia anything. Where no one cared I had once been Andrew's sister, or labeled the ungrateful daughter. I wanted to start from zero, at least for 2 weeks. Santorini welcomed us with warm sunlight and salty sea breeze. White houses perched along steep hillsides, Winding cobblestone streets leading to small cafes where locals sipped espresso slowly, unfazed by the constant stream of tourists. I realized I was breathing easier. No more notifications from my old family. No more unsolicited advice from people who never stood in my shoes. No more prying eyes or half-hearted questions about responsibility and duty. And that was enough. On the third afternoon in Santorini, Jake took me to a small seaside taverna. We sat beneath a trellis of bougainvillea, facing the endless blue of the sea. He held my hand, gentle yet firm. I know you're not one to talk much about feelings, but today, I want you to hold on to this moment. Not for me, for yourself. I looked at him, not answering right away. There were too many things I wanted to say, but in the end, I just exhaled slowly. I used to think happiness meant making everyone else happy, working hard enough, being good enough, being proper enough to be recognized. I paused, squeezing his hand. But it turns out, happiness comes from knowing how to say no to people who don't know how to value you. Jake didn't say a word, but the smile in his eyes told me he understood. The following days were quiet. We slept in, ate late breakfasts, wandered narrow alleys, snapped a few unedited photos, laughed at small, silly things. In the evenings, we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset sink slowly, as if the world wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. For the first time in my life, I was living without needing to prove anything to anyone. When the honeymoon ended, we returned to Seattle. Life didn't suddenly turn into a fairy tale. Work was still busy. Bills still arrived. But the difference was, this time, I knew how to draw boundaries for myself. My old family could no longer touch my life. I'd no longer checked emails, hoping for a genuine apology. I no longer clung to the hope that one day they would see my worth. I didn't need to pretend to be strong when people preached blood ties never turn away from each other. I simply lived my life. My studio started getting more projects. Young couples came to me not because of any big reputation, but because they trusted how I saw the world. Authentic, no frills. Jake remained my quiet, steady partner. We weren't the perfect Instagram couple, but with every passing day, I became more certain I had chosen the right person. One late afternoon, while tidying up my workspace, I stumbled upon my old camera. Not the one Andrew had taken, but the one I later bought with my own hard-earned money. I touched it and smiled. No anger, no regret, just pride. Pride for surviving those uncertain days without losing myself. Pride for having the courage to let go of what no longer deserved to stay. And most of all, pride for finally learning how to protect my happiness, firmly and quietly. The Amelia of today was finally living as her true self. Amelia's story isn't just about a wedding without her biological family. It's the coming-of-age journey that many people face in real life. Boundaries are not about cutting people off with hatred. They're about protecting your own peace and self-worth. Not everyone knows how to love properly, but everyone has the right to choose who will walk with them on the important roads of life. Just like Amelia, sometimes happiness begins when you dare to say no to the things that have held you back for too long. What do you think about Amelia's journey? Was she right to choose her own happiness? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about family and life.